Don't bother showing up this year, Natasha, my sister Camille sneered through the phone, her voice dripping with satisfaction. Maybe spending Thanksgiving alone will teach you some humility. She hung up, expecting me to beg for forgiveness. Instead, 3 days later, I was hosting the most spectacular Thanksgiving dinner our family had ever seen, and she wasn't invited. Let us know in the comments where you're watching. If this resonated, don't miss out on subscribing because tomorrow I'm sharing something that will completely change how you think about this topic. The call came on a Tuesday evening in November, just as I was reviewing the wine pairings for what I'd assumed would be our traditional Thanksgiving gathering at Camille's house in Millbrook Heights. I'd been handling the planning details for weeks, coordinating with cousins, arranging travel schedules, even ordering the specialty ingredients Aunt Delphine always requested for her famous cranberry soufflé. Natasha, we need to talk. Camille's tone was crisp, businesslike, the same voice she used in her corporate communications job when delivering bad news to clients. Of course, I said, setting aside my notebook filled with seating arrangements. Is everything okay with Thursday? Do you need me to pick up anything else? Actually, that's what I'm calling about. A pause that stretched too long. Rowan and I have decided to keep Thanksgiving small this year. Just immediate family. I blinked, confused. We were immediate family. Camille was my only sister, and I'd been spending every major holiday at her pristine colonial for the past 5 years, ever since our parents moved to their retirement community in Sunset Canyon. Small how? I asked carefully. Rowan's parents, the kids, mom and dad. That's it. The deliberate omission hit like a physical blow. And me? Natasha, let's be honest here. Every family gathering turns into the Natasha show. You waltz in with your designer clothes and your stories about gallery openings and wine tastings, making everyone feel inadequate. What? Camille, I bring wine because I enjoy sharing good bottles with family. I talk about my work because people ask. You talk about your work because you love reminding us all how successful you are, while the rest of us struggle with mortgages and kids' college funds. The accusations stunned me into silence. My interior design business had indeed flourished over the past decade, allowing me luxuries I'd worked incredibly hard to achieve. But sharing my life with family had never been about showing off. It was about connection, about having people to celebrate successes with. Since when do you struggle, Camille? You and Rowan both have excellent jobs. See, there it is again, that tone, like you're looking down on us from your ivory tower. I'm not. I would never. My voice caught. Camille, we're sisters. I love you. I love your kids. I bring expensive wine because I want to share things that bring me joy. I talk about my projects because I'm proud of what I've built, and I thought you were proud too. Pride is one thing, Natasha. Arrogance is another. The words sliced through years of what I'd believed was a close relationship. Yes, we were different. Camille had married young, focused on family, chosen suburban stability. I'd remained single, built a business, traveled extensively. But I'd never seen it as competition, only as different paths that led to the same family table. What brought this on? I asked, my voice smaller than I'd intended. Did I do something specific? Say something that hurt you? It's not one thing, Natasha. It's everything. The way you corrected Mom about wine storage at Easter, how you redecorated Aunt Delphine's opinion about her dining room without being asked, the way you always have the perfect gift that makes everyone else's look cheap. Each example felt like a distortion of my intentions. I mentioned proper wine storage because Mom was storing a good bottle in direct sunlight. I offered design advice to Aunt Delphine because she'd complained about her cramped space. I chose thoughtful gifts because I cared deeply about the people receiving them. So what are you saying exactly? I'm saying maybe it's time you learned what it feels like to be on the outside looking in. Maybe spending one Thanksgiving alone will give you some perspective on how the rest of us feel when you're around. The cruelty in her voice shocked me. This wasn't about wine storage or gift giving. This was about years of resentment I'd been completely blind to. Camille, please, let's talk about this in person. If I've made you feel bad, if I've been insensitive, I want to understand. The decision is made, Natasha. Don't bother showing up Thursday. Maybe next year you'll have learned some humility. The line went dead. I sat in my Bruckstone loft, staring at the phone, trying to process what had just happened. In 38 years of life, I'd never been excluded from a family gathering. Even during my rebellious teenage years, even through college when I'd been too busy with internships to visit often. Even during the lean early years of my business when I'd felt inadequate compared to Camille's settled life, the family table had always had a place for me. My first instinct was to call back, to apologize for whatever I'd done wrong, to beg for another chance. My fingers hovered over Camille's contact, ready to grovel if necessary.
But something stopped me. A memory surfaced of last Christmas when I'd brought a case of vintage champagne to celebrate the holidays. Camille had made a sharp comment about showing off again, but I'd brushed it off as holiday stress. Now I remembered other moments. The eye rolls when I mentioned business trips, the subtle digs about my fancy lifestyle, the way conversations shifted when I entered rooms. Had I really been that oblivious to my family's feelings? Had my success, my joy in sharing it, truly made them feel diminished? The questions swirled as I poured myself a glass of wine, an expensive Burgundy that suddenly felt like evidence of my alleged arrogance. My beautiful loft, filled with carefully curated art and furniture, felt less like a sanctuary and more like a monument to everything Camille had accused me of. Outside my floor-to-ceiling windows, Brookstone's downtown sparkled with early holiday lights. Families would be gathering in a few days, sharing stories and gratitude around crowded tables. And for the first time in my adult life, I would be spending Thanksgiving completely alone. The isolation felt complete. If I called Mom and Dad, they'd be caught in the middle, and clearly they'd already chosen sides by accepting Camille's immediate family-only rule. Our cousins would attend Camille's dinner, unaware of the drama, probably wondering where I was, but not enough to reach out. I had built a successful business, a beautiful home, a comfortable life, but apparently I had failed at the most basic thing, maintaining the family relationships that mattered most. As the reality settled over me, I realized Camille had succeeded in her cruel lesson. I was truly, completely alone, and I had no idea what I was going to do about it. If you're loving what you're hearing, smash that subscribe button. It really keeps us going. All right, let's jump back in. The first day after Camille's call, I maintained the illusion that this could be fixed. I drafted a dozen different text messages, apologies, explanations, pleas for reconciliation, but deleted each one before hitting send. Pride and hurt warred in my chest as I stared at my phone, willing it to ring with Camille calling to say she had made a mistake. By Wednesday morning, reality began to settle in. I wandered through my loft like a ghost, past the empty dining table I'd already mentally set for one, past the unused guest bedroom where I had hoped family might stay someday. The silence felt oppressive in a space that usually brought me peace. My refrigerator held the beginnings of what should have been my contribution to Camille's dinner: organic Brussels sprouts from the farmer's market, artisanal butter, a selection of French cheeses I'd planned to arrange on the antique silver platter that had belonged to our grandmother. Looking at these abandoned ingredients felt like examining the remains of a life I thought I was living. I tried to work, losing myself in client projects and design proposals, but every few minutes my mind drifted to Millbrook Heights. Were they setting up tables in Camille's dining room right now? Had anyone asked where I was, or had Camille simply announced I wouldn't be coming with some carefully crafted excuse? The worst part was the growing suspicion that maybe Camille was right. Maybe I had become the person she described, someone so wrapped up in success and material comfort that I'd lost sight of how others felt around me. The expensive wine, the thoughtful but costly gifts, the stories about gallery openings and business trips, had these really been attempts to connect? Or had I been unconsciously showing off? Wednesday afternoon brought an unexpected text from our cousin Jasper. "Hey, Camille said you can't make it tomorrow. Everything okay?" I stared at the message for 20 minutes. Here was my opening. I could tell Jasper what really happened, could create the family rift that would force everyone to choose sides. But the thought of turning Thanksgiving into a battlefield made me feel sick. "Just some work conflicts," I typed back. "Have fun tomorrow." "That sucks. Won't be the same without you." Those 6 words broke something inside me. Jasper's genuine disappointment proved that at least someone valued my presence at family gatherings. But it also highlighted how isolated I had become. One cousin's text message felt like a lifeline in an ocean of silence. Thursday morning arrived, gray and drizzling, the kind of November day that made staying in bed feel justified. I'd slept poorly, dreams filled with empty chairs at dinner tables and muffled conversations I couldn't quite hear. The clock read 9:47 a.m. Normally, I'd be getting ready to head to Camille's, my contribution loaded in the car, my outfit carefully chosen to look festive but not overly fancy. Instead, I made coffee in my pajamas and tried to decide what someone does when they're spending Thanksgiving utterly alone. The grocery store was my first mistake. I'd thought I might buy ingredients for a simple meal for one, but the sight of families loading their carts with turkey and pie ingredients sent me fleeing to the wine aisle. I grabbed a bottle of Prosecco. If I was going to be miserable, I might as well be miserable with good alcohol. Back home, I attempted to create some semblance of a holiday. I lit candles, put on jazz music, and arranged the French cheeses on a small plate. But sitting at my granite kitchen island with a glass of Prosecco and expensive cheese felt more pathetic than celebratory. This wasn't gratitude, it was expensive self-pity.
Social media proved to be another landmine. My feed filled with photos of family gatherings, people posting grateful messages about time with loved ones, pictures of perfectly golden turkeys and laughing children. I found myself scrolling obsessively, looking for any photos from Camille's dinner, both dreading and hoping to see evidence of the celebration I'd been excluded from. When the photos finally appeared, around 3 p.m., they cut deeper than I'd expected. There was Mom, wearing the scarf I'd brought her from Paris last Christmas, laughing at something Dad was saying. Rowan's parents looked comfortable and included, clearly not struggling with the immediate family-only rule that had excluded me. The kids were making faces at the camera, and even Aunt Delphine looked happier than I'd seen her in years. But it was the photo of the dinner table that destroyed me completely. My usual spot between Jasper and Aunt Delphine was filled by Rowan's teenage nephew, a kid I'd met maybe twice. It was as if I'd never existed, as if 10 years of family Thanksgivings had been erased with the simple rearrangement of place settings. I set my phone aside and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Brookstone. Below, the streets were quiet. Most people presumably gathered around dinner tables, sharing stories and creating memories. The isolation felt complete now. Not just from my family, but from the entire ritual of gratitude and connection that defined this day. For the first time since Camille's call, I cried. Not pretty tears, but the ugly, body-shaking sobs of someone realizing they might have lost something irreplaceable. All my success, all my beautiful possessions, all the comfort and luxury I'd worked so hard to achieve, none of it mattered when there was no one to share it with. The afternoon stretched endlessly. I tried reading, tried working, tried watching movies, but nothing could distract me from the growing awareness that this was what my life actually looked like. Not the curated version I showed the world with its busy social calendar and impressive professional achievements, but the truth. I was fundamentally alone. As evening fell, I found myself in my home office staring at the wall of awards and recognition I'd accumulated over the years. Interior Designer of the Year, Excellence in Sustainable Design, Rising Star in Commercial Spaces. Each plaque represented hundreds of hours of work. Clients who trusted me with their most important spaces, dreams I'd helped bring to life. But none of them had called to check in on me today. None of them had invited me to join their family celebrations. They were professional relationships, not personal ones. And I was finally seeing the difference. The worst part was the growing realization that Camille might not have been entirely wrong. Had I really become so focused on achievement and acquisition that I'd forgotten how to just be a sister, a daughter, a cousin? When was the last time I called family members just to check in, without some agenda about holiday planning or gift giving? When had I last shown interest in their lives without somehow turning the conversation back to my own experiences? By 8 p.m., the Prosecco was gone. The cheese remained largely untouched, and I was lying on my designer sofa feeling sorrier for myself than I ever had in my adult life. This was Camille's lesson, I realized. This crushing loneliness, this forced examination of who I'd become and what I'd prioritized. Outside, Brookstone's downtown began to come alive again as families finished their dinners and ventured out for evening walks. Through my windows, I could see couples strolling hand in hand, children running ahead of parents, multi-generational groups moving with the satisfied slowness of people who'd eaten too much good food and shared too much laughter. I pressed my face against the cold glass and whispered the first words I'd spoken aloud all day. I don't want to be alone anymore. The admission hung in the air like a prayer. And for the first time since Tuesday night, I felt something other than hurt and anger. I felt determination. This Thanksgiving had been a disaster, but it didn't have to define all my future holidays. Camille had taught me what it felt like to be excluded, but maybe that lesson could teach me something valuable about inclusion. As I finally headed to bed, one thought echoed in my mind. I never wanted to feel this alone again, and I never wanted anyone else to feel this way either. If my family had rejected me, maybe it was time to think about creating a different kind of family. One built on choice rather than obligation, on genuine care rather than genetic connection. The seeds of an idea were already forming, though I wouldn't recognize their significance until morning.
The inspiration had come from an unlikely source. While scrolling through social media the night before, I'd stumbled across a post from Trevor, a photographer I'd worked with on several commercial projects. He'd written, "Another holiday solo in my studio apartment. Sometimes I wonder if success is worth the isolation." The post had dozens of comments from other people echoing similar sentiments, talented, accomplished individuals who'd somehow ended up spending major holidays alone. That's when I remembered the estate. 3 years ago, I'd inherited my great-aunt Cordelia's property in Maple Ridge, Vermont, 200 acres of rolling hills, maple groves, and a stunning 1890s farmhouse that I'd been meaning to renovate as a weekend retreat. The project had been perpetually delayed by client demands and my own perfectionist tendencies, but the house was structurally sound and had a dining room that could seat 20 people comfortably. By 9 a.m., I was in my car heading north on Route 89, my trunk loaded with cleaning supplies, and a growing sense of purpose. The 2-hour drive through Vermont's mountain valleys gave me time to think, to plan, and to feel something I hadn't experienced in days: excitement. The estate looked exactly as I'd left it 6 months ago, slightly wild around the edges, but undeniably magical. The farmhouse sat on a gentle rise overlooking a pond that reflected the bare branches of surrounding maples. The wraparound porch needed attention, and the gardens were overgrown, but the bones of the place were magnificent. Standing in the grand foyer with its original wide plank floors and soaring ceilings, I could envision something extraordinary taking shape. The dining room took my breath away. Cordelia's massive oak table could indeed seat 20 people, and the built-in china cabinet still held her collection of heritage ironstone. The kitchen, while dated, was enormous and functional, with a 6-burner commercial-grade stove and double ovens that would make catering possible. Large windows throughout the first floor flooded the spaces with natural light, and the stone fireplace in the living room begged for a crackling fire and comfortable conversations. This could work. This could actually work. I spent the day cleaning and assessing what would need immediate attention. The house had good bones but required fresh linens, thorough dusting, and strategic decorating to feel welcoming rather than abandoned. The kitchen needed a deep clean but was fully operational. Most importantly, the dining room just needed proper lighting and perhaps some seasonal decorations to transform into something spectacular. That evening, I sat on the front porch with a cup of tea and my phone, crafting the most important social media post of my life. Thanksgiving Part 2.
Open invitation to anyone spending next Thursday alone. I'm hosting dinner at my estate in Maple Ridge, Vermont. Beautiful setting, home-cooked meal, and the chance to create new traditions with fellow independent souls. Message me if you're interested. Let's turn solo holidays into chosen family celebrations. I hesitated for only a moment before hitting post, then shared it across all my professional networks and sent personal invitations to Trevor and several other acquaintances I knew would be spending the holiday alone. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within an hour, I had 23 people expressing genuine interest. By morning, the number had grown to 38. People weren't just responding, they were sharing their stories, their gratitude for the invitation, their own experiences with holiday loneliness. Leela, a freelance graphic designer, wrote, "I moved to Burlington 6 months ago and don't know a soul. This feels like a miracle." David, a retired professor, shared, "My daughter lives in California and I've been dreading another year of takeout Chinese and Netflix. Count me in." Rachel, a nurse who worked holidays so others could be with family, said, "I have Thursday off for the first time in 3 years and nowhere to go. This is perfect." Each response filled me with energy and purpose. These weren't charity cases. They were accomplished, interesting people who'd found themselves in similar circumstances as mine. We were creating something intentional, something better than the obligatory family gatherings many of us had grown tired of enduring. The logistics became my obsession. I created spreadsheets tracking RSVPs, dietary restrictions, and who was bringing what. My interior design skills kicked into high gear as I planned the perfect atmosphere. Warm but elegant, festive but not overwhelming. I ordered fresh linens in autumn colors, arranged for a florist in Maple Ridge to create centerpieces, and contacted a local farm for fresh ingredients. The house transformed under my attention. I worked 18-hour days, cleaning every surface, arranging furniture, testing recipes in the expansive kitchen. My hands grew rough from scrubbing and polishing, my back ached from hauling furniture, but I felt more energized than I had in months. This was creation in its purest form, not designing spaces for clients, but crafting an experience that would matter to real people. By Tuesday, the guest list had settled at 26 people, a perfect number for the space. I'd learned remarkable things about each attendee through our planning conversations. Marcus was a veterinarian who'd moved to Vermont to open a rural practice. Jennifer was a writer finishing her first novel in a cabin outside town. Paolo was a chef between restaurants, and Thomas was a social worker who spent so much time caring for others that he'd neglected building his own support network. These weren't people who couldn't maintain relationships. They were people who'd prioritized other things, who'd moved for opportunities, who'd made choices that led to independence rather than traditional family structures. We had more in common than geography. We shared the experience of building meaningful lives outside conventional expectations.
Wednesday brought an unexpected challenge: snow. Not the gentle dusting that would make everything picturesque, but a proper Vermont snowfall that threatened to make the winding road to the estate treacherous. I spent the morning arranging for a plow service and creating backup transportation plans, determined not to let weather derail what had become the most important dinner party of my life. That afternoon, early arrivals began appearing despite the snow. Leela showed up with homemade bread and infectious enthusiasm. David brought wine and stories from his years teaching literature. Rachel arrived with medical supplies and a practical attitude that immediately put everyone at ease when Paolo slipped on the porch steps. What struck me most was how naturally everyone pitched in. Without being asked, people began helping with food preparation, setting tables, and arranging flowers. The kitchen became a hub of collaborative cooking, with Paolo directing traffic while 3 others chopped vegetables, and someone else managed multiple dishes in the ovens. The conversations flowed as easily as the wine. I found myself learning about sustainable farming from Marcus, discussing plot structure with Jennifer, and getting life advice from David that had nothing to do with holiday planning. These weren't strangers making small talk. We were people discovering genuine connections.
As evening fell and the snow continued, it became clear that several guests would need to spend the night rather than risk the dangerous roads. Far from being a problem, this felt like a gift. We built fires in multiple fireplaces, arranged impromptu sleeping arrangements, and settled in for what was becoming more than just a dinner. It was becoming a retreat from ordinary life. Sitting in the living room with a dozen new friends, listening to Jennifer read excerpts from her novel while snow painted the windows white, I realized something profound had shifted. This wasn't about replacing my biological family or proving anything to Camille. This was about discovering that family could be something you chose, something you created, something built on shared values rather than shared genetics. The loneliness I'd felt just days before seemed like a memory from another lifetime. Surrounded by people who'd chosen to be here, who'd embraced the adventure of celebrating with strangers, I felt more connected than I had in years of obligatory family gatherings where conversation felt scripted and interactions felt performed. Tomorrow would be Thanksgiving, but the real celebration had already begun. We'd created something unprecedented in my experience, a gathering based purely on the desire to share gratitude and good food with other human beings without the weight of family expectations or historical grievances. As I climbed the stairs to my childhood room under the eaves, I could hear quiet conversations continuing in the living room below, new friendships forming over chess games and shared stories. This was what I'd been missing all along. Not just the presence of other people, but the presence of people who genuinely wanted to be present. Thursday morning dawned crisp and brilliant, the overnight snow having transformed the estate into something from a holiday postcard. Through the kitchen windows, I watched early risers exploring the grounds, Thomas sketching the frost-covered pond, Rachel building a snowman with the playful enthusiasm of someone who rarely had time for such simple pleasures. The house hummed with the contented energy of people who'd chosen to be exactly where they were. By 8 a.m., the kitchen had become mission control. Paolo, the chef between restaurants, had appointed himself head of operations, and I marveled at how naturally everyone fell into roles. Leela designed hand-lettered place cards, while David regaled us with stories of Thanksgivings past. Jennifer documented everything with her writer's eye, already talking about the essay this experience would inspire. "This is what kitchens are supposed to feel like," Marcus observed, expertly carving vegetables with the precision of someone accustomed to delicate work. Like the heart of a home, not a showpiece. His comment struck me profoundly. My Brookstone loft had a beautiful kitchen, granite countertops, professional appliances, perfect lighting, but it had never felt like this. This kitchen was alive with purpose, filled with laughter and collaboration, ingredients transforming into something greater than their individual parts. The menu had evolved organically through group text conversations over the past week. Traditional elements anchored the meal: turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce, but each dish reflected our collective creativity. Paolo's herb-crusted turkey incorporated techniques from his professional training. Leela's grandmother's sweet potato recipe had been adapted for dietary restrictions. David contributed his late wife's famous apple pie, the first time he had made it since her passing 3 years ago. "She would have loved this," he told me quietly while rolling pastry dough. "Martha always said holidays should be about bringing people together, not enduring them." As afternoon approached, our dinner preparations had evolved into something resembling a small festival. Someone had discovered Cordelia's old sound system, and jazz music flowed through the first floor. The dining room table, set with mismatched vintage china and Leela's beautiful place cards, looked more elegant than any formal dinner I'd ever attended. The centerpieces, branches of snow-dusted pine and maple arranged in mason jars, perfectly captured the rustic sophistication I'd been hoping to achieve. But it was the conversations that truly elevated the experience. These weren't people making small talk to pass time. They were individuals sharing authentic pieces of themselves. Rachel described her work in pediatric oncology with a passion that brought tears to several eyes. Jennifer read excerpts from her novel in progress, her voice gaining confidence as she realized she had a genuinely engaged audience. Paolo shared his dream of opening a farm-to-table restaurant that would support local agriculture while providing excellent food. "This is what we're missing in our regular lives," Thomas observed during a quiet moment on the porch. "Real conversations with people who actually listen. Most of my social interactions are either work-related or surface-level pleasantries with neighbors I barely know." His words crystallized something I'd been feeling all morning. This wasn't just a dinner party, it was a masterclass in human connection. We'd created an environment where people felt safe to be genuinely themselves, where stories were heard and valued, where differences in background became sources of fascination rather than division. The actual dinner exceeded every expectation I dared to have. 26 people gathered around Cordelia's table with additional seating arranged nearby for those who preferred the informality of perching on window seats or sitting on floor cushions. The food was spectacular, but the atmosphere was transformative. When it came time to share gratitude, something magical happened. Instead of rushed, obligatory statements, people spoke from the heart about finding unexpected community, about feeling seen and valued, about discovering that chosen family could be just as meaningful as biological family. Several people were moved to tears, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of belonging somewhere. "I'm grateful for Natasha's courage to invite strangers into her home," Leela said, her voice thick with emotion. "And for discovering that strangers don't stay strangers long when you share real conversation and good food." David raised his glass of wine, a bottle I'd chosen specifically for its ability to pair with multiple dishes, and proposed a toast. "To Natasha, who turned one person's loss into 26 people's gain, and to all of us for proving that family is what you make it." The recognition in that moment felt more meaningful than any professional award I'd ever received. These people weren't praising me out of obligation or politeness. They were genuinely grateful for an experience that had enriched their lives. I'd used my skills, my resources, and my inherited property to create something that mattered deeply to real people. As evening fell and we moved to the living room for dessert and coffee, the conversation naturally evolved into planning. People began exchanging contact information, making plans to meet in smaller groups, discussing the possibility of regular gatherings. Rachel suggested monthly potlucks. Paolo offered to teach cooking classes. Jennifer proposed a book club that would meet at different members' homes. "We can't let this be a one-time thing," Marcus declared. "We found something special here. Why would we go back to being strangers?" The spontaneous formation of ongoing community felt like witnessing the birth of something unprecedented in my experience. We weren't just people who'd shared a meal. We were becoming an intentional chosen family, united by the recognition that we'd created something worth preserving and expanding. Around 10 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Jasper. "Hope you're having a good holiday, despite the work conflicts. Dinner was nice, but felt weird without you there." The message arrived at the perfect moment to provide contrast. While I felt a brief pang of sadness about missing traditional family time, it was overwhelmed by gratitude for where I actually was. Jasper's text represented obligation, duty, the complex emotions of navigating family dynamics that had been strained for reasons I still didn't fully understand. This living room, filled with people who'd chosen to spend their holiday with me, represented something entirely different. Connection based on mutual appreciation. Community built on shared values. Family defined by intention rather than accident of birth. I showed the text to David, who'd become something of a mentor figure throughout the day. His response was characteristically wise. Sometimes the family that chooses you is more important than the family you were born into. Both have value, but you can't force one to be the other.
As guests began preparing for bed, half the group was staying overnight due to snow and wine. I found myself in the kitchen with Paolo and Thomas, cleaning dishes and marveling at what we'd accomplished. The kitchen, which had been spotless 12 hours earlier, showed the beautiful evidence of a meal shared by people who'd thrown themselves wholeheartedly into the experience. "You realize what you've started here, don't you?" Paulo asked, carefully washing Cordelia's vintage glasses. "This isn't just about one Thanksgiving. You've created a model for how people can build community intentionally, how we can take care of each other without waiting for institutions or traditional structures to do it for us." His words carried weight I wasn't sure I was ready for. Had I really created something with broader significance, or had we simply had a particularly successful dinner party? The enthusiasm and ongoing planning suggested something deeper was happening, a recognition that modern life's isolation wasn't inevitable, that people could take active steps to create the connections they craved.
As I finally headed upstairs, the house settling into comfortable quiet around sleeping friends, I reflected on how dramatically my relationship with Thanksgiving had been transformed in just 1 week. 7 days ago, I'd been dreading a holiday that represented family obligation and hidden resentments. Tonight, I was falling asleep in a house full of people who'd chosen to celebrate gratitude together, who'd created new traditions based on mutual respect and genuine affection. The success felt profound because it wasn't accidental. Every element, from the menu planning to the seating arrangements to the conversations that emerged, had been intentionally designed to foster connection and celebrate what we had rather than mourn what we lacked. I'd applied my professional skills to personal life in ways I'd never attempted before, and the results had exceeded anything I'd imagined possible. Friday afternoon brought an unexpected visitor to the estate. I was in the kitchen with the remaining guests. About half the group had decided to extend their stay through the weekend, when I heard a car crunching up the snow-covered driveway. Through the window, I recognized the silver SUV immediately. Camille's vehicle, the same one she'd driven to countless family gatherings where she'd subtly made me feel like an outsider in my own family. My stomach clenched as I watched her park and sit in the driver's seat for a long moment, clearly steeling herself for whatever conversation she'd driven 2 hours to have. Rachel, who was helping me prepare lunch leftovers, noticed my sudden stillness. "Everything okay?" she asked quietly. "My sister," I said, watching Camille finally open her car door. "The one who uninvited me from Thanksgiving." The kitchen fell silent. Most of my guests knew the basic story of why I'd been free to host them, and the protective energy that immediately surrounded me felt both surprising and deeply moving. These people, who'd barely known me a week ago, were ready to stand with me against whatever drama was approaching. "Want us to give you privacy?" David asked, but his tone suggested he'd prefer to stay nearby. "Actually, I'd appreciate it if you stayed," I realized. "You're my family now, too." Camille knocked on the front door. Knocked, as if she were a stranger rather than someone who'd grown up visiting this house during summer vacations with Aunt Cordelia. When I opened the door, her expression cycled through surprise, confusion, and something that might have been envy. She looked older than I remembered, tired in a way that went beyond the 2-hour drive. Her usual perfectly coordinated outfit, designer jeans, cashmere sweater, expensive boots, seemed somehow diminished against the backdrop of the estate, which was glowing with the warmth of genuine hospitality. "Natasha," she said, her voice lacking its usual commanding tone. "I hope you don't mind me dropping by." "Of course not," I replied, though my body remained tense. "Come in. We were just having lunch." She stepped inside and immediately froze. The house was alive with the comfortable sounds of people who belonged, laughter from the living room, quiet conversation from the kitchen, classical music playing softly in the background. The dining room table still bore the beautiful remains of yesterday's feast, and the entire first floor carried the lingering aromas of herbs and good food. "We?" she asked. "I hosted Thanksgiving here," I explained simply. 26 people. We're extending the celebration through the weekend."
Her eyes widened as she processed disinformation. Behind me, I could sense my chosen family moving quietly through their afternoon activities, giving us space while remaining supportively nearby. The contrast with Camille's isolation was stark. She'd driven here alone, clearly struggling with whatever motivated the surprise visit. 26 people, she repeated. But you said you were alone. You said, I was alone when you uninvited me, I corrected gently. So I decided to create something different. We moved to the living room where Thomas was reading by the fireplace and Jennifer was curled up with her laptop working on her novel. They greeted Camille politely, but without the deference she usually expected from people meeting her for the first time. These weren't people impressed by her corporate success or designer accessories. They were people who valued substance over status. I need to talk to you privately, Camille said, her uncomfortable obvious. I'd prefer to talk here. These people are important to me. Her face reddened slightly. She wasn't accustomed to not getting her way immediately, especially with me. For years, I'd accommodated her preferences, deferred to her judgment, allowed her to set the terms of our relationship. That version of me felt like a stranger now. Fine, she said, settling stiffly on the edge of Cordelia's antique sofa. I came to apologize. The words hung in the air between us. An apology I desperately wanted just days ago now felt somehow insufficient, arriving too late, and with too many conditions implied in her tone. I'm listening, I said. Rowan and I had a fight after Thanksgiving dinner, she began, her voice small. He said I was jealous of you, that I'd driven away the most interesting person in our family because I couldn't handle not being the center of attention. I waited for her to continue, offering neither comfort nor contradiction.
Mom kept asking where you were. Dad looked disappointed when I said you had work conflicts. Even the kids noticed something was off. She twisted her wedding ring, a nervous habit I remembered from childhood. Jasper called me out directly, said it was cruel to exclude you and that whatever problem I had with you, this wasn't the way to handle it. The admission that the dinner hadn't been the perfect family gathering she'd envisioned provided no satisfaction. Instead, I felt sad for everyone who'd been caught in the middle of her resentment toward me. What exactly did you want to accomplish by coming here? I asked. I want you to come to Christmas, she said, the words rushing out. I want to fix this. We're sisters, Natasha. We shouldn't let pride destroy our family. Before I could respond, Paulo appeared from the kitchen carrying a tray of coffee and homemade cookies, the kind of hospitality that had become second nature in this house over the past few days. Thought you might want refreshments, he said with the easy confidence of someone who belonged. Camille, right? Natasha's mentioned you. The simple interaction illuminated everything wrong with Camille's approach. She'd driven here expecting to find me isolated and grateful for reconciliation, ready to accept her terms for restored family harmony. Instead, she'd found me surrounded by people who valued my company, in a home where I was clearly the beloved hostess, rather than the problematic sister. You've mentioned me? Camille asked, after Paulo returned to the kitchen. I've talked about my family situation, I said carefully. These people know why I was available to host Thanksgiving. Her face flushed deeper. What did you tell them? The truth, that my sister felt I was too arrogant and self-centered to include in family gatherings, so she uninvited me to teach me humility. That's not... I didn't mean it like that, she protested. How did you mean it, Camille? I asked, genuinely curious. Because from my perspective, you made a unilateral decision to exclude me from Thanksgiving, told me I needed to learn humility, and hung up when I tried to discuss it. What was I supposed to understand from that? She looked around the room, taking in the evidence of the life I'd built in her absence. The comfortable furniture arranged for conversation, the books and games that suggested ongoing gatherings, the easy way Thomas and Jennifer moved through the space as if they belonged. I was angry, she admitted finally. Angry that everything comes so easily to you. The business success, the beautiful apartment, the ability to buy expensive gifts without thinking about it. I work just as hard as you do, but I'll never have what you have.
Her honesty was more painful than her cruelty had been. Camille, I never intended to make you feel inadequate. I shared things with family because I was proud of my work, not because I wanted to show off. But it felt like showing off, she said, tears beginning to form. Every holiday, every family gathering, it was the Natasha show. Your latest project, your newest client, your amazing trip to wherever. Meanwhile, I'm dealing with mortgage payments and teenagers who hate me and a husband who works too many hours. My life felt so small compared to yours. The admission broke something open in my chest. This wasn't about arrogance or humility. This was about two sisters who'd grown apart without neither of us recognizing what was happening. Your life isn't small, I said gently. You've raised incredible kids, built a solid marriage, created stability that I've never achieved. I envied that, Camille. I envied having people who needed you every day, who counted on you for more than just professional services. You envied my life? She stared in disbelief. Of course I did. Do you know how lonely it gets, having professional success but no one to share it with at the end of the day? I talked about work at family gatherings because work was literally all I had to talk about. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of years of miscommunication settling between us. Around us, the house continued its gentle rhythm of chosen family life, quiet conversations, shared activities, the kind of comfortable coexistence I'd been building with these remarkable people. So, what happens now? Camille asked. I considered her question carefully. I don't know, I admitted. I'm not the same person you uninvited from Thanksgiving. That woman was desperate for family approval, willing to diminish herself to keep peace. This woman has discovered she can create her own family, her own traditions, her own definition of belonging. Are you saying you don't want to be part of our family anymore? I'm saying I won't be part of a family that requires me to be smaller than I am. If you want me at Christmas, it has to be because you genuinely want my company, not because excluding me made everyone else uncomfortable. She nodded slowly, processing this boundary. And if I do want your company, genuinely, then we start over, not trying to recreate what we had before, but building something new based on who we actually are now, rather than who we used to be. Camille glanced around the room again, her gaze lingering on Thomas, who was quietly sketching the fireplace, and Jennifer, who was absorbed in her writing. Would it be possible for me to meet some of these people properly? I'd like to understand what you've built here. The request surprised me, but I recognized something in her voice I hadn't heard before. Genuine curiosity rather than defensive judgment.
Of course, I said. Fair warning, though. They're going to ask you about yourself, not your relationship to me. They're interested in people as individuals, not as supporting characters in someone else's story. Over the next hour, I watched Camille have real conversations with my chosen family members. She listened to Rachel's work stories, asked Thomas thoughtful questions about his art, and even shared some of her own professional challenges with Jennifer. The defensive walls she'd built around her resentment began to crack as she discovered that these people were interested in her as a person, not as the sister of their hostess. When it was time for her to leave, she lingered in the doorway. I don't know if I can be the sister you need me to be, she said honestly. I don't need you to be anything specific, I replied. I just need you to be genuine. The sister who came here today, willing to be curious about my life instead of threatened by it, that's someone I'd like to know better. She nodded, tears in her eyes. Christmas is at my house, same as always. But if you want to host something here instead, or bring some of these people, I think I could handle sharing the spotlight. After she left, I sat on the porch with David, watching her taillights disappear down the winding road. How do you feel? He asked. Different, I said, surprising myself with the answer. A week ago, I would have been grateful for any crumb of acceptance from her. Today, I realized I don't need her approval to know my worth. If we rebuild our relationship, it will be because we both choose to, not because family obligation demands it.
Sunday evening brought the end of our extended celebration as the last guests prepared to return to their regular lives. But the relationships forged over 4 days of genuine connection weren't ending. They were evolving into something sustainable. Plans were made, contact information exchanged, and a calendar established for future gatherings. Same time next year? Leela asked as she packed her car. Absolutely, I replied. But let's not wait that long to see each other. Standing on the porch as cars disappeared into the Vermont twilight, I felt a completeness I'd never experienced before. This house, these people, this life I'd accidentally created from the ashes of family rejection, it was better than anything I'd imagined possible. Camille had tried to teach me about humility by excluding me from Thanksgiving. Instead, she'd taught me about possibility. Sometimes the people who try to diminish you end up showing you just how bright you can shine when you stop dimming your light for their comfort. The estate was quiet now, but it wasn't empty. It was full of potential, full of love, full of the promise of future gatherings where chosen family would continue to choose each other again and again. Next up, 2 more stories chosen just for you. If you enjoyed this, you'll want to see what's coming. Tap to keep going.